I think Kuminga finding his lead as a different, like that idea that he's a different kind of player than the Warriors usually have, that he's a little bit out of their normal scope. But he's giving them the scoring dynamicism. He's being aggressive. He looks more comfortable. He looks assertive. He looks like he's coming into himself. I think this is a big deal for what the Warriors' ceiling is this year. Stuff to figure out, like how do you play him and Mooney and Draymond, or Looney and him and Draymond all together at the same time? I think it's a fair question. I think ultimately they will fill that out loss. I don't think this takes them into, let's say, title contender status, but I like this team a ton more if we're getting a great elevated version of Jonathan Kuminga going forward. That game last night really feels like it bodes well for where Kuminga's going this year.
Maybe. I mean, you could charge me with being the skeptical police right now, but
yeah, that's fine.
He's done this before. Like he's had nights where he's gone off and then followed that up with nights where he hasn't gone off, right? Like he's been, inconsistent, and a lot of, Warriors fans would point to the fact that his role has been inconsistent, and therefore he's been inconsistent. And it's not a coincidence that in a game without Steph and a game without Draymond, Jonathan Kuminga goes off. Like that is a very important part of this formula. What is not going to be part of Golden State's winning formula is Steph Curry and Draymond Green not playing basketball games.
Absolutely true.
So the real key here, and when I will be impressed, is when Kuminga is able to do this on a regular basis with Curry and Draymond. And right now, that's been the problem. They started the season trying to start Jonathan Kuminga alongside Draymond, Wiggins, and Trace Jackson Davis with Steph in like this big jumbo lineup. They stuck with that for only like a handful of games. Eventually moved Kuminga to the bench. And he played well coming off the bench, and he's been okay playing off the bench, but he has not been that number 2 scorer that they needed. And he wasn't that number 2 scorer against Houston because he was the number 1 scorer against Houston. So this idea of can Jonathan Kuminga be this number 2 scorer for the Golden State Warriors is still a question that we have no answers to.
I think that's fair. I feel like that game, though, makes it. I could just be getting excited about him. I've always been a fan. The physical tools are obviously there, and he's been a guy that like last year I think greatly improved, and he's still pretty young relatively. It's one of those things where we forget how young these guys are. They need someone. There's like a gap in that roster for that number 2 scorer that you're talking about, and I just think it's more likely to be him than it's ever going to be Wiggins.
Mm-hmm.
And like Buddy Hield's sort of like if you can get him hot, like that's like just like a added bonus, and that tells you something maybe about the roster structure. I think this is still a big trade team at some point if they're really going to pursue another title with Steph and Draymond. But I think this is the kind of performance, the way he did it, how it was kind of mucky, how he did just have to kind of do the damn thing. It gives me hope that at least that if someone on this team is going to figure it out and give them another punch this year, and there's not a trade coming, I think it feels like it's that is there for Kuminga if he can find that consistency. If he can find it, I think that opportunity for him to really break out is staring him in the face.
Yeah, it's definitely partly him, and this is a guy who always kind of wanted to be a scorer in the NBA. I remember talking with him, I think a couple of years ago, and he was talking about how he grew up watching Kobe Bryant highlights, and that was his idol, and he wants to be Kobe. And you could see it. Sometimes he kind of gets into that mid-range area, gets into those fadeaways. You saw it last night in Houston. Like, that's the kind of game he wants to play, and that does not jive with Golden State Warriors basketball in the Steph Curry era. Like, that doesn't go together.
Kerr, which he said, it's like 12 guys. It's like there was a thing in one of the stories I read where he was like, it's the 12 guys all together is democracy, but if it goes bad, it's like communism, which is the most Steve Kerr way of describing a 12-man basketball team.
I love that.
It's so good. It's so
always
good.
Bringing politics into it, Steve.
Just Dame Steve, yeah.
So I don't know. The fit is still really weird, and then at the same time, like there are times when they really need that, right? Like where they kind of have to get away from all the kumbaya, share the ball, Steph Curry running around basketball, and just like give this guy the ball and just go get a damn bucket. And Kuminga is the best on the team at that. He might be the only one on the team who could do that, right? Where he's just sort of this sledgehammer type of tool that they have in their toolbox that, and Steve Kerr and the Warriors, they've talked about this before. Like we've never really had a player like Jonathan Kuminga before, but like with this new tool, they're not really sure how to use it. And it's been now a long process of trying to find out how to use Jonathan Kuminga properly, and they still aren't really there yet. And so that's why I'm really skeptical, is because, yeah, Jonathan Kuminga is getting better year over year. I think that's true. I think it's also fair to say he's not where most people expected him to be at this stage of his career. Like people probably thought he was going to be a lot better than this, that he would be a guy who was like a no-brainer, give him the contract extension, and obviously he wasn't. And so, I think there's a lot that goes into that we've been talking about. It's not all on him, but it's also partly on him. So, it's been up and down. I just need to see it more consistently before I'm ready to be like, yeah, this is the guy that they need. Here's the thing, and you hit on this earlier, Chris, but okay, you can't play, and they've decided we can't play Jonathan Kuminga, Draymond Green, and a center. We just can't play those lineups. There's not enough space on the floor. And Steve Kerr has been adamant that we're going to start games with a center. Like, we have to. We cannot start games with Draymond Green at center. It's too much wear and tear over the course of the 82-game regular season. That's not a lineup that we could start games with. So he's been adamant. He started with Trace Jackson Davis. Kevon Looney has gotten back into the starting lineup. He's been playing really well for them. And so that's why Kuminga keeps going to the bench. But what if they brought Draymond Green off the bench? It's a half-baked take, and I don't think I would do it, but like, what if they made him the Andre Iguodala of this team? Like, he kind of takes the Iggy role and like, okay, eventually you get to your small ball lineup, and that sort of gets unlocked when Draymond is on the floor, because the Draymond plus center lineups have their own inherent issues. But at least if it's Kuminga at power forward with Kevon Looney, you still have a scorer at that 4 spot. And I think, like, look, Draymond Green's on-off numbers this year are awesome. Like, he is far and away Golden State's second best player. There's no question about it. But I do think there's enough perimeter defenders there. If they're getting a good Andrew Wiggins season on both sides of the ball. Like, they've got Gary Payton back there defensively. They've got some guys who can compete defensively. Like, I don't know. Maybe you could survive in certain matchups with Draymond coming off the bench. Again, half-baked. Don't even know if I would do this. Don't know if I would believe it. But I'm throwing the question out to the group here.
If they had a superstar on this, if they had made a superstar trade, I think you could do it. I think it's hard to do it when there's not another like purely superstar all NBA.
You mean like politically?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think if it was like we have our title window, we deep down know it's open because we have X star player on our team with Curry and with Draymond, and the core is there. I think it's possible. I think in this iteration, I can't imagine that working.
Unless they think Kuminga can turn into that because they've moved Draymond to the bench.
Yeah, I guess I just wonder if I wonder if that's something they would have, if we knew. I think they like Kuminga, but they've never obviously, I think, ever been fully just head over heels with.
I think that's very fair.
So far.
I think it's a very fair assessment.
And I think if they were head over heels with him in that way, that we might have seen it. That's a hunch. Don't know that, but
can I go conspiracy?
Yeah.
What if you told Draymond, hey, buddy, listen, take one for the team. You're going to come off the bench. You're still going to play your minutes. You're still going to play at the end of the halves. You're going to go small ball. It's all going to be good. But we're going to showcase Jonathan Kuminga for a couple of months here as the starter. And we think that he could score 20 points per game plus in this role as the power forward with you coming off the bench. And then we think we could trade him. Because right now, him coming off the bench, it's just not where his value isn't where we need it to be. What if they sold it? Like, they pitched it to Draymond that. And then once we trade him, we're going to get somebody who fits, and then you guys are going to be able to make a run for it. And yeah, you're going to get your starting job back, obviously. But this is just for a couple of months here. I think Draymond would be like, yep, sign me up, no problem.
Mike, I agree. Mike Dunleavy, get on it, if that's the case. Crazy. I would just say, like, we don't always learn about these things, but the way guys talk about some of this stuff after the fact, I do think that kind of thing happens more often than people know, than we the media know. I think like over time that stuff does happen in quiet corners.
And I don't think it would even be sort of considered cheating, right? Like, it would be, hey, this is what Jonathan Kuminga could do without this wonky fit. And if you're a team that doesn't have somebody like Draymond who's just a wonky fit with him, then this is what Jonathan Kuminga could be for you, right? Like, they could sell it. And I think if you're another team that would see Kuminga in that role, you'd be like, I think that would work for us because we don't have a Draymond Green type. We don't have these floor spacing issues with our best player, one of our best players on the court. So we can be the team that houses and fosters Jonathan Kuminga's star potential, right? And so, I don't know. I do think it's just galaxy brainy enough for the Warriors to do it. Like, they are not a team that has shied away from the galaxy braining of roster building.
It's very startup culture energy. If they were to
yeah, this is Amazon not reporting any gains for like the first 40 years or something. There's just like, no, trust us, we got a plan.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like Google. Like Google's like has Chrome, and it's like everyone's like mad about like needing to spin off Chrome, but it's like that's not the thing. They actually just if they got a bunch of money for that of a thing that has no value outside of their ecosystem, they'd be happy with it. And if they just got Kuminga and it's like Jimmy Butler now plays for the Golden State Warriors, they'd be happy with that.
Is that the team that you would want Kuminga on? Or can I rephrase it? Is there a team that you would like to see Kuminga on?
I was trying to match it really with like I think the tricky part is you have to match it with like an age appropriate star to send back. You know, like that's kind of
like an older star, like one that's ready to go.
Yeah, like that's like it would have been like Paul George with the Clippers last year, for instance. Like that in some ways that a George Kuminga trade with matching salaries in season last year might have made some sense for both sides. And there's not a ton of that kind of guy I feel like is like staring you in the face right now that fit with Golden State. Like Jimmy would be one.
I mean, Jimmy's even like 35. It's like, okay, we're going to get 1, maybe 2 years of good Jimmy Butler and we're going to punt on Kuminga. Like that, that's tough.
Just I guess what are you politicking with Steph and Draymond? Open question. We'll see how aggressive the Warriors